St. Vincent's High School had always been known for its strict rules and old-fashioned values, but there was one place on campus that students whispered about in fear: Room 206. The room had been locked up for years after an unfortunate incident involving a teacher who mysteriously disappeared one evening. No one knew what really happened, but some said that Room 206 was haunted. Sophia and her friends, Jake and Emily, weren't the type to believe in ghost stories. But one late afternoon, after staying back for extra classes, they dared each other to sneak into the old abandoned room. The school was deserted, and the sun was setting, casting long shadows in the empty hallways. It seemed like the perfect time for a little adventure. They reached Room 206, and to their surprise, the door was unlocked. Creaking it open, they stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the room was unnaturally cold, despite it being summer. The desks were still arranged in neat rows, as if waiting for a class that never came. The three of them exchanged nervous glances, but none wanted to admit their unease. As they explored the room, Jake spotted something odd. On one of the desks, a stack of old papers lay untouched, with the name Mrs. Patterson written at the top. Mrs. Patterson was the teacher who had vanished all those years ago. The room grew colder, and the atmosphere heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Suddenly, the door to the classroom slammed shut with a deafening bang. They ran to it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as the lights began to flicker. Emily screamed as one of the desks moved on its own, scraping loudly against the floor. Sophia looked around, her heart racing, and then she saw it. Something in the corner, barely visible in the flickering light. A shadowy figure stood in the far corner of the room, watching them. It was the faint outline of a woman, her face obscured but her eyes glowing faintly. The figure seemed to glide closer, and a cold, eerie voice whispered, "Get out." They bolted for the door, banging on it in desperation. As if by some unseen force, it finally swung open, and they ran out of the room, not daring to look back. The next day, they found out that Room 206 had been locked again, but no one had touched it. They never spoke about what happened, but they knew that whatever haunted Room 206 wasn't done, waiting for its next victim. Kennedy High School's gymnasium was always bustling with activity. Basketball games, cheerleading practices, and assemblies. But after hours, when the lights were off and the halls were quiet, there were rumors that the gym wasn't as empty as it seemed. Lucas, a senior on the basketball team, often stayed late, practicing his shots. He was used to being alone in the gym, but one night, something felt off. As he practiced, the gym was unusually silent, the echo of the basketball bouncing back to him in a strange, hollow way. The dim lights cast long shadows, and for the first time, Lucas felt uneasy. As he lined up for another shot, he heard it, a faint sound, like the shuffle of feet coming from the bleachers. He paused, staring into the empty seats, but saw nothing. Brushing it off, he continued playing, but the shuffling sound grew louder, as if someone was pacing back and forth. He called out, thinking it was one of his friends playing a prank. "Who's there?" His voice echoed back at him, but no answer. The sound stopped for a moment, and just as Lucas was about to shoot again, he saw it, a figure sitting in the top row of the bleachers, barely visible in the dim light. It was a boy, sitting perfectly still, his head down. Lucas froze, feeling a chill run down his spine. The boy looked strangely out of place, wearing an old-fashioned gym uniform, the kind that hadn't been worn in decades. Lucas blinked, and when he looked again, the figure was gone. His heart pounded as he grabbed his things and made for the exit, but before he could reach the door, He heard the sound of a basketball bouncing behind him. Slowly, he turned, and there it was. The ball he had left on the court was moving on its own, bouncing slowly towards him. Suddenly, the gym lights flickered, and Lucas could see the boy again, standing in the middle of the court. His face was pale, and his eyes were hollow, staring directly at Lucas. The boy raised his hand, and Lucas felt a cold gust of air sweep through the gym. The basketball stopped bouncing, and the boy's voice echoed faintly. "You shouldn't be here." Lucas didn't wait to find out what happened next. He bolted out of the gym, the door slamming behind him with a force that shook the walls. From that night on, Lucas refused to stay late at the gym again, and the ghost of the boy was never mentioned, though everyone knew, deep down, that he was still there, waiting for someone else to find him.